Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I'd like to talk to you about a known gem wearing a different pair of pants, and that's your Spyderco Delica here, but using a set of Wilkins D4 titanium grips on it. Now, I've discussed the Delica a whole bunch, and I really do believe it is one of the very best everyday carry knives out there in existence. You can watch my What's the Best EDC Knife, you can watch my other review of it, and, you know, it's just a gem, the Delica on the whole. And so I'm going to try and put aside for the moment the knife itself and talk more about the effect of the scales on this particular knife. Also worth pointing out that this has a Lynch deep carry clip, and that's not included with the scales. And that's the same guy who made this deep carry clip on my Delica. He put the shorter one on there, which is a little more subtle. I've got the longer one on there, which feels a little more secure in the pocket. But either way, that's what's going on there. I want to throw out a quick thank you to my buddy Ian for sending this along, and should probably do a size comparison. So here's your Spyderco Delica. Yeah, I guess that works, right? Yeah, Sleesh Buoy, size comparison. Perfect. Anyways, now that I've compared the Delica to the Delica, we can go on ahead and jump into the good, the bad, and the ugly of these particular scales. So there's definitely some good here. They are very solid and very nicely made. There's no burring, there's no unpleasantness associated with them in that particular way. The manufacturing here is just top-notch. And the ergonomics are good. Just as they are on the Delica. There's no real issue here ergonomically, and, you know, you can even do the choil forward kind of grip that I do tend to like on it. No problem at all. It came with some aftermarket screws. You can see that the screws here are different than the screws on your Delica. These are flat-headed screws, and they look a little nicer with the overall titanium, and the head of them's a little bit thicker, so no real complaints there. It's plenty grippy in your hands. You're not going to be able to pull this out of your hands with these texturings down here. All the chamfering's good, no real complaint there. There's a blasted finish here, so it's not going to get snail trails as quickly as a stonewash kind of titanium, like on your Sleesh Buoy here. And, I mean, I guess the very best part about these is that they don't interfere with the Delica being a Delica. The functioning is just fine. Backlock works like a charm, and, you know, in the hand, this feels just as much like a Delica as anything, with a couple of very subtle changes. But they're not, you know, really, really bad scales can really change the character of a knife and make the knife less interesting, and this is not the case. This is just every bit of Delica, it's just a slightly heavier Delica. And, you know, it's a little bit beefier too. So, you know, there's your good. Like I said, the ergonomics are good. It came with really good screws. The fit and finish is just great. It's plenty grippy, plenty durable, and the Delica with these scales is still very much the Delica. And that's a beautiful thing. Let's jump into the bad, because unfortunately there is some bad here. Okay, couple issues here. First and foremost, by the time you're buying a $168 pair of scales, you probably know exactly how you like to carry the knife, so you don't need to have it drilled 4 ways. You can just order one that's in your preferred carry format. I understand it makes it a little easier to stock it, but it kind of adds a bit of clutter to the knife when it really doesn't need to have it anymore. If you're making it custom, might as well make it custom. So that's one little gripe. Speaking of things that add clutter to the knife, the writing here I'm not a big fan of. The Wilkins D4 here doesn't need to be there. We know who we bought the damn thing from. Calm it down. And the fact that it's on the other side too? No. Just no. So I really wish they'd cut that out. I'm not a huge fan of the dimpled look, particularly given that they're actually 2 separate sets of kind of 2 different areas of it. Everything to this side is on one pattern, and everything to this side is on another pattern. And I understand why they did it, but, you know, it just makes it feel, I don't know, a little slipshod or something to me. And I don't get why they stopped where they did. They could have added more dimples in a bunch of places here, but so I kind of wish they'd done with just something more like a cutout or some lines or something like that, rather than the dimples. It just, I don't know, it is geometrically done and they're all even, but at some level it just looks like some guy went to town on this with a drill press. And it just doesn't thrill me in that particular way. Maybe I'm just crazy here, but actually, well, we know I'm crazy. But anyways, then finally the other issue is if we compare this to your Delica, there's a whole bunch of extra beef in a couple of ways. First off, you can see that, for instance, this area here is actually bigger on your Wilkins version than on your regular Delica. which is a little bit less than ideal, although it doesn't really hurt the ergonomics. And similarly, the amount of cutout right here is a little stronger on your real Delica, or I'm sorry, on your original Delica than on your Wilkins. And similarly, there's a cutout here that isn't there on the Wilkins. And then finally, if you actually look at the back of your Delica, you can see that the Wilkins here has a whole bunch of extra junk in the trunk here. And I don't mind some junk in the trunk, don't get me wrong, but here, it becomes a problem because it adds to the weight, and this is a very, very heavy knife. Well, okay, not very, very heavy, it's, but nonetheless, basically, when you look at your Wilkins grip here, you end up at about 4.2, 4.17 ounces. That's almost double the weight of your original Delica, and that's almost the same weight as you get in your Sleesh buoy here. Well, give or take 20 ounces, 0.2 ounces. Wow, math is hard. But anyways, you end up with a Delica that is actually surprisingly heavy in the pocket. It's not bad, it's certainly carryable, but it takes away one of the things that makes the Delica very much a Delica, and that is that lightweight nature. So that's something you really got to keep in mind, is that this makes your Delica a lot heavier, and a big part of that is because they added extra material where they didn't need to. They added it on the back here. And I feel like they could have done a lot better at removing material to improve that. So there you're bad here. I don't like all the clutter they've done on it. I'm not a huge fan of the dimpling, and it's just a very extra beefy kind of thing that doesn't need to be. So let's go into the ugly. 3 ugly things here, actually. First and foremost is your G10 backspacer. I just don't see it here. They've made this fairly svelte and fairly curvy, and then they go to squared off G10 here. Just having some trouble there. And the fact that it's not flush even where it could be flush is just, I don't know. I know that you need a backspacer for the design because you need something that holds the spring for the backlock. So I'm not faulting them for not using washers or something, or standoffs. But it just feels uninspired. I mean, the rest of it is very clearly industrially designed in one way, but this part just isn't. And they could have done much better if they just flush fit the whole damn thing, but they didn't. Or maybe done something lighter. Although G10's fairly lightweight anyways. But I'm just not a big fan of that. Second ugly thing is that the balance gets thrown off. On your normal Delica, your balance is, if you're holding it, right about, here-ish in your hand. In this guy, your balance is further back. And I know it doesn't feel like that, but it very much is. And so it feels a little further back in the hand. It's not terrible, and it's not as big a balance change as, say, those copper scales were on the PM2, but it's still a pretty big balance change. And so I kind of wish that they'd gotten rid of, again, some of the junk in the trunk here, or even skeletonized some of the insides. Would have made things a little easier here. So there you go. Then the final ugly thing here is that these scales are $168 plus the price of your Delica. So at that point, if you do something like, just a regular Delica, you're now 3 Delicas, or 3.5 Delicas into a Delica in terms of price. You've now got a $240, or if you do ZDP, you've got a damn near $270 Spyderco Delica. And it's a great knife, and it's worth that. And if you love the Delica but just wish it had a little more substance to it, this is a great way to do that. But honestly, at that point, you're very, very close to another knife. I mean, at that point, you could buy a Sleesh buoy for $270, or for $240, you could get your ZT0562CF here. And I'm just not entirely convinced that this is a $200 change knife. Especially when the regular Delica is so damn good anyways. So, I mean, there's your ugly. The G10 backspacer, the balance is a little bit off, and you're 3.5 Delicas into a Delica price-wise, and that messes with your cost-carry comfort curve a little bit here. So, what's the final verdict? Here? I mean, this does make the Delica a beefier knife, no doubt. And they're well-made scales. I got no real complaints with the construction here. And, of course, I got some gripes with the weight, with the balance, the aesthetics. They've made some choices I'm not a big fan of, and it's pretty pricey. But if you want a Titanium Delica, this is a damn good way to go about that. And especially because fewer people are making models for scales for the Delica than for other knives. So, great. No real issue there. And this little combination here is pretty compelling for EDC. A ZDP plus a Titanium Delica. I got no complaints there. The only real issue is that cost is pretty up there. $220, $270 is way, way up there. And in a lot of ways, this to me is, there's an expression in English, gilding the lily, which means that you're taking something that's already beautiful and trying to make it more beautiful. And it doesn't always work. And I kind of feel like that's what happened here. Because the Delica, sure, titanium's beefier, but your regular Delica's pretty beefy as is. And let's face it, if you do manage to break your Delica, you can replace it 2.5 times for the cost of doing this, which is something you got to keep in mind. And similarly, the lightness of the Delica is really a part of the joy of the Delica, and so doubling its weight and making it weigh about the same as the Sleesh buoy makes it a little less compelling. And if I'm going to carry this, honestly, I would probably just carry the Sleesh buoy instead, given that they're both about the same in terms of price and that they're both about the same in terms of weight in the pocket. This one's smaller, certainly, but I don't know. And so ultimately, it kind of reinforces to me how good the actual stock Delica is to start with. I mean, this is great. If you want titanium, go for it. But for me, the way it shipped at $65 kind of wins. And that's a little strange. But hey, whatever. I'll take it. So, like I said, if you want to titanify your Delica, this is a good way to go, as particularly if you're okay with some of the aesthetic choices and you're willing to take some weight. But otherwise, the Delica's plenty competent as it is, and I just don't necessarily see the need to go the extra mile here. Still, I'm really glad I got to try it. Thank you very much, Ian, for sending this along, and have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day.